Have you ever wondered if a single act of kindness could ripple through time and completely transform someone's world? What I'm about to share with you is so powerful, so unexpected, that by the end of this, you might never look at generosity the same way again. A cold afternoon, dead leaves swirling across marble and stone. I'm standing in a cemetery, visiting the grave of the man I loved more than anything in this world. And there, kneeling at his headstone, is a complete stranger. A man I've never seen before in my life, sobbing like he just lost his own family. My first thought? Who is this person? Why is he crying at my husband's grave? Now, let me take you back to that moment, because what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about loss, about moving forward, and about what it really means to honor someone's legacy. The wind was brutal that day. Sharp. Unforgiving. I'd wrapped myself in my most expensive coat, but it did nothing against the chill that had settled into my bones over the past few months. Grief has a way of making you cold from the inside out, you know? No amount of luxury can fix that. I approached slowly, my heels clicking against the stone path. The man didn't hear me at first. He was too focused on placing this cheap bouquet against the headstone, his hands trembling so badly that the flowers nearly fell. His jacket was worn thin, patches at the elbows. Boots that had clearly survived more winters than they should have. Everything about him screamed struggle. That's my husband's grave. My voice came out sharper than I intended. Who are you? He froze. Actually froze, like I'd caught him doing something wrong. When he finally turned around, I saw his face properly. Tears streaming down dark, weathered skin. Eyes filled with a pain I recognized because I'd seen it in my own mirror every single morning. I'm sorry, he said, his voice breaking. I didn't mean to intrude. But here's the thing. He still hadn't answered my question. And I needed to know. What connection could this struggling stranger possibly have to my millionaire husband? It didn't make sense. Nothing about this made sense. I pushed harder. You didn't answer me. Who are you? He looked down at the grave, like the name carved in stone weighed 1,000 pounds. My name is Darnell, he finally said. Your husband saved my life. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I'd been married to Jonathan for 15 years. I thought I knew everything about him. His routines, his quirks, his business deals, his charity work. But as Darnell started talking, I realized I didn't know him at all. Not really. 3 years ago, Darnell was living in his car with his 4-year-old daughter. Let that sink in for a second. A grown man, a father, sleeping in a vehicle because he'd lost everything. His wife had left. His business had collapsed. The bank took his house. He couldn't even afford to feed his little girl. Can you imagine that level of desperation? That crushing weight of failure as a parent? He told me he was sitting outside a diner one night, his daughter asleep in the back seat, trying to figure out how to make $5 last until the weekend. That's when Jonathan walked out. Here's what gets me. Jonathan didn't just see Darnell and keep walking like most people would. He didn't throw money at him and leave. He actually sat down, on the curb, next to a homeless stranger, and he pulled out a pack of peppermint candies. Darnell's voice dropped to barely a whisper when he told me what Jonathan said next. Kindness doesn't need a reason. It just needs a moment. I felt my breath catch. That sounded exactly like something Jonathan would say. Those little philosophical nuggets he'd drop into conversation that made you stop and really think. But it gets even more incredible. Jonathan handed Darnell an envelope and told him not to open it until he left. Inside was enough money to get an apartment. First month's rent, security deposit, enough to actually start over. Not alone. A gift. And the only condition? When you're standing again, help someone else. I stood there, staring at this man, this stranger who knew a side of my husband I'd never witnessed. Jonathan had always been private about his charity work. He used to say that real generosity doesn't need applause, that if you do something good just to be recognized, it's not kindness, it's performance. But I had no idea he was out there finding people like Darnell. Sitting with them. Changing their entire lives with a single moment of humanity. Darnell told me he tried to find Jonathan afterward. Wanted to thank him, to show him that he'd made it, that his daughter was okay. But he didn't even know Jonathan's full name. Then, 2 weeks before this cemetery encounter, he saw the obituary in the paper. So I came here, Darnell said, kneeling again, to say what I should have said years ago. Thank you. The silence that followed felt eternal. Just wind, distant traffic, and the weight of a kindness I never knew existed. I stepped forward, placed my hand on Jonathan's headstone. He never told me about this, I admitted. Never mentioned you. Your daughter. And right then, something shifted inside me. I'd been so focused on my grief, on what I'd lost, that I'd forgotten what Jonathan actually stood for. He didn't do good things to build monuments to himself. He did them because it was the right thing to do. Quietly. Individually. Person by person. I reached into my coat and pulled out a business card. Old habit from my corporate days. If you ever need anything, call me, I said, holding it out. That's what Jonathan would want. Darnell hesitated. I didn't come here to ask for help. I know. Take it anyway. Looking back now, I had no idea that exchange would lead to what happened next. Because life has this funny way of testing you, of seeing if you really meant what you said. A few weeks passed. I tried to go back to normal, whatever that meant without Jonathan. Wake up. Go through the motions. Sleep. Repeat. The house felt massive and empty. Every room echoed with memories. Then my phone rang. Late evening. Number I didn't recognize. Catherine, this is Darnell. We met at the cemetery. His voice was shaking. Desperate. I'm sorry to bother you. I didn't want to call, but my daughter is sick. Really sick. And I don't have anywhere else to turn. You know that moment when you have to decide who you really are? When your values get tested in real time. This was mine. I didn't hesitate. Where are you? 40 minutes later, I pulled up to an address that broke my heart. The building was falling apart. When Darnell opened the door, I could see my breath inside the apartment. The heat wasn't working. The place was freezing. His daughter Zoe was curled under 3 blankets, burning up with fever. 7 years old, sick with pneumonia, in an apartment that felt colder than the cemetery. The clinic had given her antibiotics, but they weren't working. Darnell didn't have money for a hospital. I made a decision right there. Pack what you need. You're both coming with me. Darnell tried to protest. Pride, shame, all those emotions that keep people suffering in silence. But I shut it down. Jonathan would want this. You know he would. I have a guest house behind my property. It's been empty since Jonathan died. I couldn't bring myself to rent it out, sell it, do anything with it. But suddenly it had a purpose. We got them settled. I called my doctor. He came immediately, examined Zoe, prescribed proper medication. Within 2 days, her fever broke. Color returned to her face. She started smiling again. And something strange happened to me during those 2 days. I'd spent months feeling like I didn't matter anymore, like my purpose died with Jonathan. But watching Zoe recover, seeing relief wash over Darnell's face, I felt needed again. Important. Alive. Darnell couldn't sit still, though. I'd catch him fixing things around the property. Loose stones. Squeaky gates. Weeds in the flower beds. Then one day, I saw what he'd done to the wind chime. Jonathan had hung it 5 years ago. It broke last winter, and I couldn't bring myself to take it down or fix it. Too painful. But Darnell carefully restored it. Replaced the strings, sanded the wood, made it sing again. When I heard that soft chiming sound for the first time in months, I actually put my hand over my mouth to keep from crying. It felt like Jonathan was speaking to me somehow, reminding me that broken things can be made beautiful again. Then Zoe gave me a drawing. 3 figures holding hands under a bright sun. A man, a woman, a little girl. That's wonderful, I told her, and I meant it. Because for the first time in forever, that massive empty house felt like a home. I offered Darnell a job at Jonathan's charity foundation. He'd wanted to give back, to help others the way he'd been helped. It made perfect sense. And honestly, the foundation needed someone who understood what it felt like to need help. Someone with empathy, not just efficiency. Everything seemed to be falling into place. Until David showed up. David is my brother-in-law, Jonathan's younger brother. He'd been helping manage the foundation, and he did not approve of what was happening. He cornered Darnell at the office one afternoon. You're living in her guest house, working at my brother's foundation, spending time with her every day. Do you see how this looks? Darnell tried to explain, but David wouldn't hear it. My brother just died. Catherine is still grieving, and you show up out of nowhere. You're taking his place. Those words hit Darnell like a truck. I didn't know about this conversation until later, but it planted a seed of doubt that grew and grew. The next morning, I went to the guest house with coffee and pastries. It was becoming our routine. But when I knocked, no one answered. The door was unlocked. Inside, the space was empty. Silent. Wrong. On the kitchen table was a note in Darnell's handwriting. Thank you. I don't want you to feel conflicted because of us. They were gone. Just gone. And I felt this panic rise in my chest like nothing I'd experienced since losing Jonathan. Because I'd just found something worth protecting, worth fighting for, and it had disappeared. I grabbed my keys and drove. I didn't know where they'd go, but I had to find them. My heart was pounding. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. Then I saw them. At the bus stop. Darnell and Zoe, sitting on the bench, that worn duffel bag at their feet. Zoe's face was streaked with tears. I pulled over and walked toward them. Why did you leave? Darnell stood up, his whole body tense. Because I don't belong there. David was right. I'm just making things harder for you. David doesn't get to decide that. He's your family. He knew Jonathan. I'm just someone your husband helped once. And here's where I had to be completely honest. Maybe for the first time since Jonathan died. You're not just someone. You're the person who reminded me what Jonathan cared about. You're the person who fixed the wind chime he loved. You're the person who made my house feel like a home again. Darnell shook his head. I can't be the reason you're stuck between the past and the future. Do you know what the worst part of losing Jonathan was? My voice cracked. It wasn't the grief. It was the loneliness. Waking up every day in that empty house and realizing no one needed me anymore. That I didn't matter. I looked at Zoe, then back at Darnell. But then you called. And you needed help. And for the first time in months, I felt like I had a purpose again. Like I wasn't just existing. I was living. Zoe tugged on her father's sleeve. Dad, please. I don't want to leave. I'm scared, Darnell admitted, his voice barely audible. I'm scared that I'm not good enough. That I'll fail again. That I'll let you down. I stepped closer. We're all scared, Darnell. But we don't have to be scared alone. Zoe ran to me and wrapped her small arms around my waist. Please don't let us go, Miss Catherine. I knelt down and held her tight. Tears streaming down my face. I won't. I promise. The bus drove past without stopping. We didn't need it anymore. But I didn't take them straight home. I drove to the cemetery instead. We stood in front of Jonathan's grave together, the three of us. I placed my hand on the headstone. I've been holding on to you so tightly, I said. I didn't want to let go. I thought that if I moved forward, I'd be betraying you. My voice was steady, but full of everything I'd been carrying. But I know that's not what you would have wanted. You always told me that life was meant to be lived. That love wasn't something to hoard. It was something to share. I looked at Darnell and Zoe. You saved them once, Jonathan. Now it's my turn. Zoe walked over and placed her tiny hand on the stone. Thank you for helping my dad, Mr. Jonathan. I wish I could have met you. And right then, David pulled into the cemetery. He walked toward us slowly, his expression softer than I'd ever seen it. I came to apologize, he said. I was wrong about you, Darnell. About what you were doing here. He looked at Jonathan's grave. My brother used to tell me that kindness doesn't need a reason. It just needs a moment. I forgot that. I thought protecting his memory meant keeping everything the same. But that's not what he would have wanted. David looked at me. He would have wanted you to be happy. And if these people make you happy, then that's enough. We hugged. Really hugged. And something that had been broken between us started to mend. The weeks and months that followed weren't perfect. Life never is. But they were full. Meaningful. Darnell continued working at the foundation. Zoe thrived. We became something I never expected after losing Jonathan. We became a family. Not a replacement. Not a do-over. Something entirely new, built on the foundation of kindness that Jonathan had laid years ago with a simple act of generosity outside a diner. One Saturday, Zoe's school held a family event. When it was her turn to introduce us, she pointed at Darnell. "This is my dad. He works at a charity that helps people." Then she pointed at me. "And this is Miss Catherine. She's the person who helped my dad believe in life again." I reached over and took Darnell's hand. Squeezed it gently. Because she was right. We'd helped each other believe again. I found a letter Jonathan had written before he died, tucked away in his desk. In it, he told me not to let grief close my heart. To open it again when I was ready. To let people in. To truly live, not just survive. "When your heart opens again," he wrote, "don't be afraid. I'll be cheering you on." Now, 3 months later, Zoe's drawing hangs on the wall of my house. 3 people holding hands under a bright sun. Beneath it, in her careful, messy handwriting, are the words, "We didn't replace anyone. We became a family." Every morning, I stand in front of it and smile. Outside, the wind chime sings. Inside, Zoe laughs. Darnell makes coffee. And the house that was once a tomb of memories has become a home full of life. So here's what I want you to take away from this. Kindness doesn't end when someone dies. It ripples forward. It multiplies. Jonathan helped Darnell. Darnell reminded me what mattered. Together, we're helping others through the foundation. And who knows how many lives will be touched by that original act of sitting on a curb with a stranger and offering a peppermint candy. Your kindness matters. That moment you take to help someone, to really see them, to sit with them in their struggle. It might save their life. It might change everything. Not just for them, but for everyone they touch afterward. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't overthink it. Just be kind. Because kindness doesn't need a reason. It just needs a moment. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And subscribe because I'll be bringing you more stories that remind us what it means to be human, to be connected, to be alive. Remember, you're not just surviving. You're living. Make it count.